Schindler has a chance to write his name in Huddersfield Town legend. And he takes that chance!
Hello and welcome to Andy Takes That Chance. Today we're doing a special episode, Schofield sacked, following the news about Danny Schofield, and to discuss all things Danny Schofield, what that means for the future of Huddersfield Town, etc. I'm joined by Tom Bradshaw and Matt Shaw. Tom, how are things?
Not too bad, Brady. How are you, mate?
I'm okay. Yeah, there's not a lot that's happened in the last 24 to 48 hours, so I'm all good.
I quite like that intro then. It was like Tom, Brad, Shaw, Matt Shaw.
Yeah.
It was just quite...
Brady's not sure.
Had a nice ring to it.
Exactly. And that other voice you can hear is the Matt Shaw you're talking about. Matt, welcome back to the warm-up. It's good to have you. Especially given these days, you only seem to pod when Town have won a game. How are you?
It's been a while, hasn't it? It's been a while.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
But no, good to hear you good, my friend. Okay, so before we get into the Cardiff preview, we do need to discuss the big issue at hand. And that's our pie chat from earlier in the week. Matt, you weren't there, so I'm going to ask you, what is your favourite matchday pie?
This is the kind of stuff I listen for, is this, Brady? Do you know what? When Town changed to do, it's Jones's, isn't it, in the stadium? Yeah. I think I had a lamb and mint one from one of the kiosks, and that was actually really decent. But ordinarily, I'd go for a meat potato, but that lamb and mint one were pretty special, to be fair. Jones's decent.
That's a good choice, actually. We didn't put the tweet out.
Look at the state of me, Brady. I'd take any of them. It's fine.
Come on.
Got no qualms with any of them.
Who doesn't?
Whoever's left.
Right. Okay. No, we're not talking about matchday pies. I mean, me and Tom talked about that for 20 minutes last episode. Anyway, we are of course talking about Danny Schofield. He was sacked yesterday after 69 nice days in charge of Huddersfield Town. Obviously relieved of his duties following the 2-1 home defeat to Wigan. So what we're going to do in this, we're going to tweak the format slightly. We're going to talk about the news, get our thoughts on it, and then answer your questions in the mailbag. Because rather unsurprisingly, your questions in the mailbag about who is going to be next in the dugout. So Tom, you've had a little bit of time to process the Schofield news. You sit here with your throne of lies. No, you sit here with a Danny Schofield shirt on as we record. What are your thoughts on the whole arrangement?
Yeah, I sit here with a match one Danny Schofield shirt on. Shout out to my mate Roulé for sending this to me, because he obviously knew how big of a Schofield fan I was. I'm very upset about it. Maybe not about the sacking, but just about how it didn't work out, because it'd just been nice, wouldn't it, to have like a proper Huddersfield through and through legend doing well for Town. I think it's probably the right decision. It's not a lot of time though, but I think it was almost evidently clear that maybe it wasn't going to change it very quickly, and maybe he just didn't know what team he wanted to play, and when you're down there already struggling, yeah, it was probably the right decision to get rid, to be fair.
Does it, obviously, you mentioned about how much you love Schofield. Does it affect how you feel about him at all, or do you think it's one of these where maybe time will pass and you can kind of forget the managerial stint?
I think because it was so short, no, it doesn't change at all, to be fair. It's not like he hasn't done wrong by the club or anything, and he hasn't... it's not like he's not been in for so long that's affected us potentially getting relegated or anything. There's loads of time left this season. That's what I mean, though. There was loads of time for him to turn it around as well, but yeah... it's not going to affect my thoughts on him, though, Brady, at all. No way.
Okay, that's good to hear, mate. Matt, I'll come to you. Coming to you with a real zinger straight away. Some people felt Schofield was maybe hung out to dry by the club. What's your opinion on that, and your opinion on the decision to remove him from his position?
I've got a lot of thoughts on it, really. I haven't quite formulated them all properly either, so this might come spewing out of all different angles, if you like. There's just that thing with Huddersfield Town where they get good, and it feels like we self-sabotage, don't we? A little bit. You know, we got good under David Wagner, and we self-sabotage. We got good last year. We lost everything. You know, we lost several players. We actively looked to sell several players, and we lost, you know, a decent head coach. So it feels like every time we get good, we panic and we just want to regress back to that comfortable 18th in the Championship where we feel happy. And it's probably nonsense. It's just the way it feels sometimes, isn't it? And the situation of the club. I think you've got to look at the actions of the club during the summer. And I think the way Danny Schofield was appointed was really strange. It's not a strange appointment. It makes a lot of sense. Danny Schofield wanted to be a head coach. He wanted the job. He's not coerced into it. He wasn't shoved into it or anything like I've seen. He wanted the job. He wanted to be a head coach. But the way the club announced it was really weird, where the book ended it in Carlos's sacking. It was almost like they shamefully pushed him in. It was really weird. I think that was just bad, just ill-judged, you know, in terms of how they announced it. And then a couple of days later, they had the interviews, etc., where Danny was quite uncomfortable in front of the media. So then that made Danny look quite like he didn't want the job. As silly as that sounds, he did. But just because he's not really used to being front and center, you know, in front of the camera and being asked questions, he was a little bit raw, shall we say. But he got better as he went on. I thought he got a lot better. And the recruitment, I think, when you look at it in isolation, it all looks quite good. You kind of go, Jack Redoni looks good. We saw Lewis O'Brien. That was coming. That's fine. Harry Toffolo, we could have kept, but we'd rather cash in on him. Okay, that's fine. Pippa, again, that's fine. Naby Sarr, etc. Levi Colwell, these players were going. So when the argument goes, he's lost 5 or 6 of the starting 11 at Wembley, you know, a couple of those would start ordinarily anyway during a regular season. So I don't think individually the recruitment's bad in terms of the players that bought in. The sort of issue I have with the recruitment is that it doesn't feel very joined up, and it doesn't quite align with what's needed. It sometimes feels like we come across players that we think, oh, he'll be a good player in future. We can work with him. My dad was a pig farmer, so you know his job was to buy young pigs, fatten them up, sell them for profit, and it's a similar sort of thing, minus the slaughter, thankfully. But you know, it's so it feels like a lot of the time we see good players that we think we can improve and sell on, which is fine, but it doesn't address the short term in that there are holes in the squad. And when Danny Schofield started the season, it was obvious the defence was wrong. It was obvious the central midfield was wrong, and that I think really affected where his starting point. And you've also as well got to look at Danny Schofield's role in the process as well. And I think Danny Schofield's role, a lot of Town fans are sort of going, this isn't Danny Schofield's fault at all. He holds no accountability. And I disagree on that as well. I'm a huge Danny Schofield fan. You know, I want Tom's shirt, for example, he's wearing. I really like Danny as a player. I like him as from the little I've seen of him as a person. And I wanted him to be really successful. But when you're brought in to do a job of continuity and then try and change everything 3 weeks before the start of the season, that is the inexperience risk, the risk on inexperience that you take. And Lee Bromby maybe at this point, as the head of football operations, should be maybe jumping in at this point and going, well, not too much too soon. And Danny's tried to change too much too soon. These players are all pre-programmed to Carlos Corberán. They're all like robots, aren't they? Everything that Carlos did was to the nth degree. He's, you know, the analysts are working with them, you know, hours throughout the day. You need to do this in this position. You need to do that in that position. And he's changed all of this throughout the season. And then in the friendlies, he's then not really worked on any partnerships within these games. They're all fragmented and players are all over the place. There's 3 or 4 first teamers over at Harrogate. There's 3 or 4 at Doncaster. And again, it goes back to the joined up thinking. There's no experience with Danny Schofield. You know, we've lost 50% of the coaching staff with Carlos and Jorge leaving, and then not replace them until 2 or 3 games into the season. And even then, you're replacing a tactical coach in Carlos, a sports scientist, with a lead development coach in Paul Harsley, when you've already got a lead development coach in Danny Schofield. So the joined up thinking again there is, for me, I would be thinking, right, we've lost a brain. And I'm not saying Danny Schofield's not, not intelligent or anything, but you've lost a tactician, you've lost an idealist. You need to replace the pieces of the jigsaw that are missing. And we've not. We've kind of gone all in with development. And again, that maybe links up to what they're thinking in terms of buying players and selling for profit in future, which aligns with maybe what Dean's trying to do. And it also aligns with what he said on Radio Leeds. But it completely screws the short term, and it completely screwed Danny Schofield in the short term, but he's also screwed himself. It sounds like Vince McMahon, doesn't it? Going back to Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels from the 90s. But, he's tried to change too much. You look at a lot of what Danny did as well tactically. Off the top of my head, you've got Nakayama playing inverted left wing back, which it looks nice on Football Manager, but in reality, it doesn't quite work out the same. Even when Pep Guardiola did it with Fabian Delphi, it was quite nice, but look at the levels. You're looking at Ollie Turton as a left centre back, which isolated Tom Lees as a right back against Blackpool, which did not work. Some of the substitutions he's made, and again you look at. I think I had another couple of examples of tactical, and the persistence with Hogg and Russell at the start in central midfield to try and press opposition. There's so many things wrong with that, and so many obvious things wrong with that. And you can either blame Danny Schofield for this, or you can maybe look at higher up and say, look, you failed to supplement Danny Schofield with a more experienced coach. And essentially, if you think that the club have failed to support Danny Schofield with a more experienced coach, then you may have the opinion that he's been hung out to dry. But Danny Schofield is older than Carlos Corberán, and Danny Schofield's been at Huddersfield longer than what Carlos Corberán was. So he has experience himself. So I think maybe the truth lies in between, in that Danny was given a great opportunity, an opportunity that he wanted. And for reasons within and without and outside of his control, it's not worked. And it's the right decision, but it just feels very, very sad that it came to that.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on there. And we've talked about it a lot on the show. And it's probably worth repeating now that he has gone, but I think it's fair to say Carlos leaving 3 weeks before the season starts, that is a difficult job for anyone to come in. Absolutely. So, I think even if you're the most experienced coach, it's really tricky. I completely agree with you though about Schofield. I think it's a difficult situation, but I don't think he.
Sorry, I forgot to say. I think I should have said as well. He was brought in for continuity as well. If I didn't mention that earlier, I spoke so long there that I've probably waffled and forgotten exactly what I've said. So, but he was brought in for continuity, and he's not continued the path. That was the point.
That was exactly my point. I think I remember going on BBC Radio Leeds and chatting to Adam Pope about it, and it was just I think if you look at it, it made the decision at the time. I know we can all talk about hindsight, but it made a lot of sense. The club were kind of, this was a bit of a shock, certainly was to us fans. And it made a lot of sense in terms of, as they mentioned, continuity. We didn't see that. And I do think Schofield had his part to play in that. And I agree with you, what you're saying about if you did want it to work, you'd probably get an experienced coach alongside him, and one that actually fits and, covers maybe the weaknesses or the skill set that Schofield doesn't have. But, touching on Schofield, I don't want to criticise him, but tactically, I think we were poor in quite a few games. I think, we persisted with a back four in pre-season, and he changes it a couple of games in. I wasn't sure what his best 11 was. I don't think he was. If I'm being harsh.
Look at the first half the other day against Wigan. At times. It's like he'd rolled up in the car park listening to the Arctic Monkeys, because he was playing like a 5-0-5 system. It was absolutely bizarre. With 5 defenders. I know, sorry, I get these things. But there's but there are things like that where it's just, it's I've probably done that on WhatsApp, haven't I, about 5 times. And you're in 5 different groups as well.
Hey, if it's good, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Exactly. That's not an Arctic Monkey song though.
It could be. Well, it sounds like one.
It does sound like one, yeah. But anyway,
I'm certainly doing that. I think I was listening to the other podcast, and Stephen Chicken, it's a what if, we'll never know. But if he had actually continued and did deliver that continuity we were kind of promised in the statements, it might have gone better. Like it's not like we were going to be top of the league, but we certainly wouldn't. I don't think we'd be in the relegation zone. But I think the thing is for me, and you hit on the head, Matt, in terms of recruitment, it looks good, and then maybe we're missing in some areas. I still think with that all in mind, and losing Toffolo and losing O'Brien, this squad should be nowhere near the relegation zone. And I think, unfortunately, and I've talked about it with Nichols and Lees, how they've kind of gone off the ball overnight. For me, that's not just them, down to them suddenly being terrible players. I think that's probably in the coaching, and unfortunately, that's why Schofield had to go to me. Tom, we've talked about a lot. I'll bring you in. Anything you want to kind of add on that?
No, I think that's really interesting. The continuity thing is a very interesting point, isn't it? It's almost just begs the question. You just want to speak to Danny and be like, why did you decide to go down that route, and why didn't you decide to like continue with what you were given the job for, really? Because like you say, as soon as he was given it, the point was there's not really going to be much change. These two have basically been a big part of what Carlos was doing last year, so hopefully it would carry on, and it just hasn't, has it? Yeah, it's a shame.
And Tom, Matt, sorry, I interrupted you, but go on.
No, sorry. I was the last thing it was sort of to add on to a point you were making, Brady, about the players. And it was the second game in the season where we were playing Birmingham away. And I said this in the WhatsApp group at the time, but I didn't want to say it on the podcast because it sounded a little bit too sensationalist after, just after the event. And I remember watching the game against Birmingham, and I was just thinking, that looks like a performance from players that want the head coach gone. And it was a really worrying performance because it was just so poor, and the decision making was so obviously poor. It's not been as bad since. There's been incremental improvement since, and I do feel for Danny because he's worked on things. He's changed the shape back, the defensive shape in particular back, and he's tried, and he's really tried. And I think there's a really good coach in Danny Schofield somewhere, and the ideas that he was trying were probably a little bit overcomplicated for players that were pre-programmed for, a more rigid and basic system with what Carlos was doing. But I think he's just tried to change too much too soon. And I think he maybe lost the players along the way because he's been brought in to be continuity in it. And because he's the man after the man, he's not Carlos. And you saw, didn't you, in all the videos, how they all loved him and they all used to call him the professor and all this. They were all big on Carlos. And unfortunately for Danny, he's the man that's followed Carlos, and he's tried to change everything that King Carlos has done. And I think they've looked at him and gone, "Who are you to change this? This is the way we do things, not that." And I just think there's a complete conflict there. And I feel sorry for Danny that he's had to go through that, because I think given a complete clean slate and a blank canvas, there's a world where Danny Schofield comes in and he's a really good coach. Unfortunately, the conditions have proven that this wasn't the right time for him to have the role.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I would say, and that Stephen Chicken kind of pointed it out, was, and I thought this is someone who's quite positive myself, Schofield was always trying to look at the good points, and that's kind of natural, especially when you're doing media and maybe that's not your experience. But again, it was kind of like he was being positive when the performances were poor. I'm not a tactical expert. Danny Schofield knows a hell of a lot more about coaching than I ever will, but I think it just, again, it jars. Like, it doesn't really, and I wonder if the players feel that. And I'm not trying to speculate, but I don't know, Tom, Matt, like, you feel free to jump in. But we saw how frustrated Sorba Thomas was at halftime in the Wigan game. Dwayne was very frustrated when he came off, and in my opinion, he had a good game, so I could understand that. But
don't do that in public.
No, it's a good point.
It's disappointing that the players should, regardless of who's in charge, should be getting behind him. I do get it though. It's like in any business, though, isn't it? If you lost a boss that you enjoyed working for and that was successful for you, and then all of a sudden someone else comes in and, I don't know, brings in standing desks and stuff, then you're going to be like, what are you doing?
About
that. So you kind of get it, but it is kind of a bit of like suck it up, and surely in football you want to, if someone's got a plan and you've not really given it a chance in reality, if that's what we are touching on here, like players maybe not getting behind this regime, it's quite disappointing.
And I obviously we've got your questions, the listeners' questions to get through. So I think we'll move on. I'll come to you guys in a sec, but I just want to kind of add as well. Like I hope this experience hasn't kind of affected Schofield's managerial coaching career, because I think it's tricky, and let's be realistic. At this moment in time, it'd be difficult to see where he goes, but I hope he can bounce back for this, because like he was well thought of, and Carlos's setup, he was considered to be a good cog in that. So that's kind of what I'd like to say. Anything else you guys like to add before?
Yeah, do you know what, Brady? I think hindsight's amazing, isn't it? What we can say in hindsight. And I wouldn't have done this at the time, but looking back, if you could do it again, this would have been a better option. And maybe the better option, because it all happened so quickly, maybe the better option would have been to put Danny in an interim or caretaker role initially.
Yeah.
And then if he does well, you can give him the job. And if he doesn't, you can slowly move him back and move someone else into the cog. And I think maybe Lee Bromby's copping a lot of stick, and I'm never going to slag Lee Bromby. I went to school with him, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. So I'm never going to go in on Lee, because I know he's actually quite a nice bloke. But he's quite newish to that role. I think sometimes he's a bit inexperienced at the role, and I think the only way you learn sometimes is by making mistakes. And I think maybe he would do the same again. And he's obviously got Dean Hoyle, who is experienced, next to him. But I think looking back, the best thing to do would have been to put Danny in a temporary role, and then if he does well, you go, right, he's ready for the job, let's move in. If he's not ready for the role, you go, all right, thanks for that, Danny. Next time it comes up, we'll revisit this. And what we've got now is we've lost a proper through and through Huddersfield Town man who's given 13 years service, all in all, perhaps something like that. And you've lost a good man. Someone said he's not a legend on Twitter to me in one of the tweets, and that's fair enough. But he is a bit of a cult hero, isn't he? Me and Tom and we've all seen, haven't we, the penalty? The penalty against Lincoln in the playoff semi-final. There was a lot of tension and pressure, and Danny Schofield was the man who stepped up and really coolly looked the keeper in the eye and sent him the wrong way with a really clever penalty. And I'm never going to forget things like that, as a Huddersfield fan. So I'm pretty gutted to lose Danny Schofield from the club, because he symbolises a lot of good things and a lot of happy memories. I think old bastards with grey in the beard like me will probably be quite disappointed that he's had to move on, because the club have put him in a position that ultimately he wasn't ready for, but ultimately nobody knew until he had the role.
Yeah, and you again, we'll move on now, but it's spot on about the interim, and I think that as well, it takes a lot of pressure off him, certainly, and I think it changes fans' expectation. But yeah, unfortunately, it's happened, and like everyone on this pod wishes Danny all the best, and whatever the next step is, like you say, it's a shame to lose such a someone who's been so important to town, and you've been a good fit.
Just a bloody good bloke, Brady. That's what he is.
A bloody good bloke. Yeah, he's
a bloody good bloke. Yeah.
Yeah, but you mentioned Lee Bromby there, so I'm going to move on, because obviously they released a statement today, because we want to know who's going to replace him. And I think we've kind of talked about it in our WhatsApp groups and etc. But I think the next appointment is quite a big one. So I'm just going to read this paragraph from the quote. Here's me taking stuff out of the context for you. But in terms of the next coach, Lee Bromby said, quote, "We want a top quality coach and leader who will get the best from our talented squad. Someone who is not only capable of making the team better as a collective and developing individuals, but who is aligned with our club philosophy to be brave, progressive, and not set any limitations on what is possible or can be achieved." So we've got a lot of questions about who we want next. So I think it's time for the mailbag.
You've got mail.
We'll head up with this one, and we kind of touched on it a little bit. We'll get started and then talk about who we want, or who, and some of the candidates. But I suppose just to kind of close on what we've talked about, Folding Stuff, he asks, is it just town fans who always want to blame and always point out the things that the club has got wrong. Carlos left and Danny was given the job earlier than planned. It didn't work out, and that's down to multiple factors, but there's a good team in that squad. Matt, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but just anything if you wanted to add.
No, he's nailed it. I think I spoke for way too long about things there, and he's nailed it in a tweet, which, you know, what I've been rambling on about for 15 minutes. Yeah, I think the only thing that, you know, he's mentioned Huddersfield fans always wanting someone to blame. I think that's just modern society these days, isn't it? I don't think Huddersfield fans are any different to anyone else or any other. Look at, you know, politically, people pointing fingers at Conservatives and Labour, etc. at the minute, and all over the place. So it's not a political broadcast, so we're not going to go into that. But yeah, he's right in what he says, but I think it's just a reflection of modern society.
Yeah, fair enough. Kind of covered it there. So yeah, if we look at Bromby's comments on top quality coach, it's David Wagner. Let's be honest. A lot of the questions we got about David Wagner, he is the favourite. And I suppose before I'll ask some of the questions, but Tom, you know, Wagner is the favourite. We've spoken about this. Would you want him back? And do you think he would come back?
Well, I think the quote from Bromby having no limitations in there is quite funny, isn't it? As like it almost makes you think, is it a bit of like an Easter egg? I don't know. I'd want him back in a sense. I think it'd unite the fans because he's back. You'd definitely have a good couple of weeks, I think, where people are like, oh, Wagner's back, great. There'd be a good bounce around the place. But it's also like that. You don't want him back to then, I don't know, maybe ruin his legacy, because this is completely different, I think, to when he came in the first time. I think there's more pressure on him coming in, which is going to be difficult. Be interested to see how the fans would react to that if he did come back. Because when he came in the first time, he came in with almost, no real pressure on him. It was almost a bit of a roll of the dice. Let's see if this lad from Dortmund can even hack it in England, kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm mixed about it, Brady. Yeah, what about you?
I don't. If you had to ask me, and I was only allowed a sentence, I don't want him to come back. And I know people are going to be like, "Oh, he's a legend." Like, I don't think you should ever go back. Clearly, Cam's recruitment team disagree with me because we've signed so many ex-players. But I think Wagner would give an uplift straight away. I think you're right about the fans uniting. I think he'd pull us out of the relegation zone. My only concern is, and Matt, I know you have thoughts on this, so I'll come to you in a sec, but it's just kind of we've moved away from that model, you know, and Wagner will want a lot more control and obviously a different caliber of manager, but Danny Cali had that control and we kind of shifted away from it as well. And, you know, there was a lot hanging on him. I think the thing you've got to ask as well is, would Wagner take it? You know, he's managed Schalke, he started really well, and then that didn't turn out so well. Obviously, he went to Young Boys, he got sacked, but I remember doing a little bit of digging at the time. They were still second in the league, and he's had a good run. So that's a bit of an interesting one, but it's not worked out for him since he's left town, really, if you look at it. And I just think it's, like you say, it's not a clean slate, and I think Town need a clean slate, you know, because the thing is, if Wagner did come back in, I think people would expect him to do miracles again. And I don't know. I know this seems silly after we finished third last season, but we've lost a lot of good players who were responsible for that. And again, legacy, I just think leave it in the past. And we have this a lot where people want former players back, and I wonder, or managers, and I think that's because you think of the good times, you know, nostalgic, but I'm not sure the good times would necessarily happen. People have talked about it as a 12-month thing, and I think I could potentially see that works. And if he comes back, you know, don't get me wrong, I'll be excited, but I'm a bit reluctant. But the only thing I would caveat though is I'm not so sure about the other candidates. But Matt, you love David Wagner, as everyone does, like everyone on this pod. But what are your thoughts? Because I know you're kind of a bit mixed as well.
I will fight anybody that says they like David Wagner more than I do. Honestly, I am David Wagner's number one fan. I even named my son after David Wagner. Kind of half after him.
His middle name?
It's Charlie Wagner, as Pozza said the other day. No, it's Charlie David. But there are things which I don't like about it. Like I said, I'm a huge David Wagner fan, but the conditions don't feel right for me. David Wagner's a whirlwind, isn't he? He comes in. He's such an amazing. I remember working at the club at the time in that scouting capacity, and we had this meeting whereby we were lucky enough to go into a room, and David Wagner was going to describe what the attributes and characteristics of every player in every position would be in a 4-2-3-1 shape, and what we as scouts would go away and look for. And he just breezed into this room like honestly like a whirlwind, so charismatic, and everybody just hung off everything he said, and honestly, you get people like that, don't you, who just everybody just openly gazes at, open eyes, your pupils widen and everything, and I can understand how he would get an initial reaction from everybody. Everybody would love him. The players would take to him. But there's a longevity question mark with me over David Wagner. With a whirlwind, whirlwinds peter out, waves crash against the beach, and I don't want to find out for the second time in my life that Santa Claus doesn't exist. And so part of me kind of thinks I would love to keep David Wagner up on this pedestal where I keep him as the best manager that Huddersfield Town have ever had, apart from maybe Herbert Chapman. And I don't want him to be removed from that. And I look at the conditions at the minute. You've got people argue with this, and it's fine. You've got what I feel is a more disengaged owner in Dean Hoyle. He's not as hands-on and as at it, as what his phrase was back then, as he used to be, which is fine. I don't think the conditions quite suit long-term success for him. And I think the problem there is that if he doesn't come in and grab us by the shirt, the shirt tail, skirt tails, I can't remember. Coattails, sorry. If he doesn't, cut that. But if he doesn't grab us by the coattails and then drag us up the league with charisma, with gegenpressing, then his reputation will suffer. And I don't really want that to happen. And I'm not convinced that the structures are right for him at the minute. And leading me on to structure, I think there's certain things. I wrote what Huddersfield Town will look for before Bromby's statement came out, and it's similar. What I've put is the players are in a slump, and they need to avoid what is referred to as PE teacher syndrome. PE teacher syndrome is, an idealistic coach with no playing background or managerial experience who comes in, and the players don't respect them because they've done nothing. It shouldn't happen, but it does. So the players, rightly or wrongly, won't accept another Danny Schofield. Although Danny Schofield's playing career wasn't that bad, but they're not going to accept someone of that ilk. They need someone who either has some form of experience, has an experienced number two, or has a good past playing career to fall back on. They need a man manager as much as anything. Maybe, a former captain type, somebody who can unite, like Lee Bromby said, somebody who can unite and bring them all together and push them forward. There's a lot, it's all David Wagner so far, isn't it? And they also need, and this is where it falls down a little bit for me, and I kind of get skeptical, is that they also need a modern head coach who can fit into the structure. And this goes back now to, so I'm going to not so much lift the lid on things, but just gently remind people, when David Wagner left, a lot of people stabbed David Wagner in the back when he went out. As soon as he was out the door, they stabbed him in the back by saying, Wagner sanctioned all these players. Not true. Semi-true. But Wagner sanctioned all these players. They're all David Wagner's players. He did everything at the club. He ran everything at the club. We want to avoid a situation again whereby one man makes too many decisions. And they rigidly stuck to, and a lot of this was Phil, when Phil came in, they rigidly stuck to the director of football operations role / sporting director and a head coach. And only a couple of months ago, a head coach has left the football club because they've refused to give him more autonomy in what the head coach's remit and role was. So 2 months down the line, are they going to completely go back on the last 3 years of, saying they don't want to do a David Wagner thing again by appointing David Wagner, who is not going to come in and be subservient to Lee Bromby and other people at the club. He's going to want to come in and make every decision that affects the playing side. So there's a decision to be made here whereby they've got to either break this structure that they've rigidly stuck to and lost 2 head coaches over, because they lost Danny Cowley over it as well, or they're going to go back to what they were in 2017 and hope David Wagner takes us on this massive ride. And if they do that, they could potentially lose Lee Bromby. So there's a lot to think about with this. And what the club needs to do is look long-term as well. Will this work long-term? Will David Wagner stick around for 3 to 5 years and take Huddersfield Town up the league? Is it going to be worth what's at the end of it? And there's a lot of things, I think, to think about. And I don't think it's quite as simple as sort of saying, bring David Wagner back in. He will. And I think in the short term, it'd be good. I think he would get us out of the relegation zone. The players would respect him. Long term, medium term, is the structure right? Is the football club right at the minute? And I don't think it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the thing is, like, would Wagner even want to take it short term? I'm not sure he would, because I think,
Oh, sorry. I've written. Sorry, Brady. I've written down 3 stumbling blocks as well, which you can. I'll throw back to you as well. I'll sorry, because you're asking a lot of questions and not getting the chance to answer stuff at the minute. But there are 3 stumbling blocks that I can see, having looked into it at the minute. The first one's David Wagner's wife, Mrs. Wagner. So maybe we have to do what the Sunderland fans did with Dick Advocat a few years ago, where they all sent his wife flowers for allowing him to continue to manage the football club. But his wife, by all accounts, loves it in Germany, doesn't want to leave. So that immediately makes it difficult. His kids have grown up now and they're not going to come with him. So that immediately makes it difficult as well in terms of he's going to be away from his family. Young boys. No, he doesn't have 2 young boys. He's got a daughter, but young boys burn. As from what I can see, his contract was still due to be in place now. And how modern football clubs, once upon a time, when you sacked a manager, you would give them a lump sum compensation fee. And this is why this will probably rule out someone like Sean Dyche for a lot of jobs as well. What they do now is they continue to keep them on the payroll and pay them a certain amount up till a certain time. And it's usually when the contracts end. And as far as what I can see, David Wagner is still in this threshold. So to get David Wagner, you'd technically probably have to get him out of what he's currently in at Young Boys, if it's still in process. So either you have to buy him out of a contract he no longer technically really has, or he has to forego what he's getting at the minute from Young Boys. So there's a point there. And the other point I've mentioned is Lee Bromby as well. How does this affect the role of Lee Bromby? Lee Bromby's got a big say, and a lot of the mailbag questions are about Lee Bromby, aren't they, Brady? He controls a lot of what goes on at Huddersfield Town, and he will have to concede a lot of what he does to bring David Wagner in. So those are the 3 stumbling blocks I can see, which makes me think he won't be in situ tomorrow, and this may go on for a couple of weeks. And I'll throw that back to you about what you think about that, because
I agree. I think the other thing as well, and you kind of prompted me while I was talking, was who knows, that we don't know what David Wagner's like personally, but I met him a couple of times, like when he was town boss. I met and my friends met him, and I'm not going to reveal like personal stories, but there was a feeling that he didn't really like the attention. Like he just wanted to concentrate on what he was doing. And I think that's another thing to consider. If he comes back here because of what he's done in the past, I'm not saying he'll be harassed, but he's going to get a lot more attention. Whereas when he was at, this is no disrespect to Young Boys, but like he's a new coach, he's probably not going to have as much attention outside, outside of his job, because I think he just kind of wants to carry on. And I think, I suppose you could argue the other way. He'd be going back somewhere where he's loved and he's kind of already on board. So it's a bit of a tricky one. I mean, Tom, what do you think? Because a lot of the questions, I'll throw this to you actually. We had a couple. So Mike Terrier, HTAFC 72 said, why do people want Wagner back? Football wasn't great. And he signed off on players. Matt kind of touched on it there. And then Lee Morris, your mate, people have forgotten Wagner's final year in charge where we were hopeless. I think that's a bit harsh. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Lee is harsh. He won't listen to this anyway, but he is harsh. But he's all right. He's a good writer.
He's a good lad.
Good writer, so we'll let him off.
We were bad that second season though, but that was accumulation of things, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What do I think about why Town fans want Wagner back? I think it's a bit of nostalgia, isn't it? It's a bit of he came on what game? Not the Stoke game. What were the one after the next home game? Didn't he? And saw the crowd and got such a West Brom, a rapturous applause, which then obviously I think made people miss him even more. It's just one of those, isn't it? I think from a point of view, when I've looked at where he's gone afterwards, he goes into places and he does inject a bit of something into a club. He would come into this Town squad and win us a good amount of games to get us out of any trouble that we're heading towards now, I think. And I think that is why a few people want him. But then it is the question again, if you want someone with a bit of longevity, is he the right man? Probably not.
Yeah. I think you touched on it there with the nostalgia, and that was obviously part of Lee Morris's question, like why are fans obsessed with bringing back ex-players and ex-managers? Because you hope it starts again.
Yeah.
Town fans do that a lot, though, don't they? They do it a lot. To be fair, Town fans they always sort of hark back to the good old days, don't they? And I think it's natural. I think it's quite natural.
Bring Alan Lee in.
No, we're not bringing Alan Desmond Lee back.
I was waiting.
There are 2 points. There are 2 points though. I think Town have brought back. Off the top of my head, I can think of 3 managers that they've brought back previously, and 2 of them were successful. Peter Jackson was successful, and Mick Buxton came back before Brady was born in 92-93. And honestly, look at the run Huddersfield went on at the end of the 92-93 season, when Mick Buxton came back, and it is absolutely phenomenal. They were bottom of League One, what's now League One, and they ended up almost finishing top. I think they might have finished towards top half. It was unbelievable. And then Warnock came in the year after. And the other guy is Tom Johnston in the 60s, who was average, I think, in his spell there. And then he came back in the 70s and he was average again. So there's been no negatives. And the probability on that makes me think that we due a bad one. So maybe that's another case against it. But
my mate's already called for Jacko to come back.
It was there the other night, wasn't it? Has there been a game this season where we've not had an ex-manager? We're 2 home games away from wheeling out Andy Ritchie, aren't we?
I know we talked about it, but I think it's particularly what's happened now. I feel so bad for Schofield that they brought Wagner back and like the team's, a bit crap and they're waving him out at half time. But that's a separate point.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Wagner and the pros and cons, but there is other people that are being considered. I suppose I like, so, some of the names, Anthony Barry, coach at Chelsea, Big Dunk, Sean Dyche, Tom. We had a bit of a Barney about Sean Dyche and whether he'd actually take that.
Not going to
Pete
take
Wild. No, he's not going to take. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Nigel Adkins.
Nothing.
Stop it. Stop. He's not going to take it.
I know he's not going to take it. I just don't think.
I know people don't have access to our WhatsApp groups, do they? But Cozzy's version of Sean Dyche might take it.
True.
It's an in jokes, isn't it?
We have in jokes. So yeah,
unlucky outsiders.
Liam Manning, one of the names I've mentioned. I suppose, lads, if you don't want Wagner, or maybe you don't want him, you're kind of mixed about it. Who do you want? I'm gonna ask because
Tom can go first.
Nice. Tom can go first.
Who do I want? Sean Dyche.
Well, Mark Harrison says we need someone. Mark Harrison says we need someone to inspire and organise the team and bring back the connection with the fans. Can't think who's available and fit the bill. Obviously, talking about Wagner there, but it's a good point. Like we do, I agree with it. We need someone to bring back that connection.
Yeah, we do.
We're 8 games into the league and it feels toxic. So, which is awful, really. So, Tom, who do you want?
Who do I want, Brady? In the ideal world, honestly, Sean Dyche, but that's not going to happen, is it?
Sean Dyche is sat on 50 grand a week at Burnley. Still,
it's not happening. It's not happening.
So yeah, anyone who thinks Sean Dyche, sorry Tom, anyone who thinks that's happening.
Oh, I don't think it'll happen. I just,
Tom, why do you think it's going to happen? Why do you
Tom,
think he's going to be there?
Why are you
just-
throwing unrealistic
don't
expectations
think-
out to the fan base? Stop projecting these unrealistic expectations.
Towner as big as he's not too big for. That was this argument the other week. He's not too big for Town. Anyway, right.
You said you wanted Thomas Tuchel. I had to
you know what?
Recording. I had to. Yeah.
He'd be good, wouldn't he? The more I look at the list, I don't know. Someone mentioned Schumacher earlier. I've seen that as a rumor at the moment. I don't know about that. See, something like that, I don't think is going to work. I think you're going to have to bring a name in. The more I look at the list, unless it's for me, I think if we want a quick fix, I'm probably going to be more happy with Wagner. Ideally, I another person top of my list is Paul Warne, but that's I don't know how much that'd cost from Rotherham, and he's actually doing all right at Rotherham this season. And I think one of his main goals is to actually have a season where he keeps Rotherham up in the Championship for, well, as long as he can. And then the more I'm looking at it, Michael Carrick is becoming a little bit, maybe he'd do a job. Matt mentioned that, like, when he went through his list of what we need, I thought a few of those, he ticks those boxes. He's a name, the players would respect him. He's going to have contacts and stuff like that. So I think they're my three. So the realistic one there is probably Michael Carrick, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is I don't think it's a great market of people who are available. And I kind of, again, hindsight doesn't help, but I feel like if you were going to do that, Town needs to do that when Carlos left. I almost feel like I joked about this with Matt and yourself, but there is kind of 11 games until the World Cup. We've got 2 weeks to make a decision. You know, I joked about Warnock, but like I almost... I don't know, like it's just a bit of a firefighting job now, but we need to think about it long term.
He's on his comedy tour though, Brady. He's not going to give that up, is he?
No, he's not. Matt, I don't know out of the names, who jumps out at you? Because I think this is it. Like this managers you'd want. And when I look at the list apart from Wagner, like there's not. I suppose you could look at Nigel Adkins, but I wouldn't want him. To be honest, but there's not a lot of experienced names in there, and I think we've kind of all talked about how we do need someone who's experienced. So I can see why people keep going back to Wagner.
I think the thing is that experience doesn't necessarily need to come from the head coach. It could come from his assistant. So I think there's that way of looking at it. I've made some notes against a lot of them in the betting, if you like. I think in an ideal world, you would want David Wagner to sweep in, like the magic man he is, rescue us, and then leave on a white horse at the end of the season with it being preempted and say thank you guys, I'm off back to my family in Germany, whilst keeping us safe, and then we can start again in the summer with properly again, with one of your idealistic coaches, if you like. Part of me thinks that if it's not going to be David Wagner, we might not have heard the name of the coach who it could be yet.
That's a good point.
There's a couple. There was a name. I'm not sure if I'm betraying trust here, but there was a name I heard in the summer that was potentially in the frame. I can't remember who told me now, so I don't know if I'm betraying it or if I've made it up. This is what happens when you hit 40, Tom. You forget who told you everything. I'm dangerous. But yeah, so Anthony Barry. If you look at it, honestly, I'd never heard of him until I looked at Wikipedia. This is the levels of research we go into on this podcast.
I mean, let's be honest, this is what everyone's doing.
Yeah, of course they do. I looked at Anthony Barry and I was like, who the hell is that? And it rang a bell, like it sounds like someone who's played fullback for Scunthorpe, doesn't it, in the late 1990s or something. And apparently it's Accrington Stanley, so it's close, similar sort of thing. But does he come in and command the respect of everybody? I'm not sure if that's PE teacher syndrome, and that's really unfair because this guy coaches Belgium with Roberto Martinez. So it's really impressive. Chelsea, Belgium. I think a lot of it will be on his personality, and I've not watched any videos on him. He could be a dark horse, but I don't think he'll be a front runner, if you know what I mean. This is turning into horse racing now. Liam Manning, MK have done the exact same thing we've done. They've sold all of their best players and find themselves in the relegation zone in League One. I think Liam Manning's a really good coach. And I think if it had been early in the summer, I'd have been all for that because he plays great football. He's had a good upbringing at West Ham. He knows what he wants. He's very he's a bit more fluid than Russell Martin, if you like, that kind of coach. But at this moment in time, I don't think you can sell to Huddersfield fans. Like Brady said, it's a little bit toxic in some sections. Does bringing a guy in from League One, the relegation zone, to the job, get fans on side? I don't think it does it? So maybe not. Duncan Ferguson. Could you imagine saying no or trying to sack Duncan Ferguson? It's not happening. He's here for life. So
He would love Jonathan Hogg, though. Those two together.
Oh yeah. But I don't think that Dean or Lee would be able to manage Duncan Ferguson. So I think potentially he's not going to be considered because, I mean, if it ticks a lot of boxes, there's no way you don't respect Duncan Ferguson. When he's been caretaker at Everton, they've actually done pretty well, and he's got an immediate lift. He's experienced. He'd actually be, I think, be quite good. But could we afford him? Could we afford to pay him what he's getting at Everton? Probably not. An interesting one's Neil Collins. There's the Bromby link. So obviously it's going to come from Leeds. They played together. I think the cross paths at Leeds/Sheffield United, that sort of late 2000s period. Everything Lee Bromby tries to do is from the late 2000s Leeds United period, by the way. There's always a link there somewhere. He's in the American second tier, though. He's got John Stead as his assistant. And I heard his name quite a while ago. So I've watched a few YouTube videos on him, and things, and heard him speak. And he's actually really improved Tampa Bay. He's interesting. He's taken them from, I think, 12th to winning the league in like 2 or 3 seasons. And I know it's second tier of America, but he does seem quite impressive and in the mold of a Heckingbottom/Wilder, solid teams who play expansive when they can. And I think it's interesting, but I don't think you parachute somebody like that into this situation. I think that, again, that's a summer appointment kind of thing. Yeah. Sean Dyche is a no. Pete Wild, me and you, Brady, had this joke, didn't we, in WhatsApp, because I really like Pete Wild, but he's in the list. He's not got the experience yet, but he was fantastic at Halifax, honestly. He did well at Oldham, did really well at Halifax, and he's smashing it at Barrow. I think maybe the next time it comes around, Pete Wild will be top of the list, because unless Bradford get him first, because I think he's going places, Pete Wild, but maybe not now. Carrick is interesting, as is Ryan Mason's not been mentioned, and there's similar there. Ryan Mason on his coaching path. Both would need. The problem with Carrick or someone like Mason is they're on good money at Spurs and Man United, but they'll bring respect. They both played for England. They'll bring respect. They're both astute thinkers, but they've neither really got championship experience from a coaching, managing point of view. So they would need to bring an experienced number 2, and you're already going to have to pay Michael Carrick or someone like that a lot of money to come in the first place. And then you're going to need to really pay for a decent number 2. Could you see Town paying big whack for a number 2?
No, not really.
No. So I think that's my issue there. They might do, or they might find a suitable candidate. Gareth Ainsworth's interesting. Lee Morris likes Gareth Ainsworth.
Yeah,
so,
he does. He does.
Ticks Lee Morris's box.
Yeah.
I actually think in a lot of ways, he's not a bad shout,
No.
The thing, I think most fans would hate the football. They would absolutely detest the football. And he's very much out of the Cowley's mould of shithouse.
Well, Matt.
Have you seen that Ryan Tafasoli video?
I haven't, but Matt, I'm just going to jump in there because we got asked a question about Wagner and style. And you may disagree with me, but let's be honest, fans would not care for winning games. Like that's for
honestly,
me.
I loved Wagner's style.
If we
I loved it.
If we won 1-0 and we're crap, like we would love it. There's a certain point.
As a football fan, I love control of the game. I love us to be in control and the ascendancy. And Wagner's team had that momentum, and the fans could get behind it and get excited. We had a lot of shots, but we wouldn't register high on XG because a lot of the shots were from outside the box, or we didn't commit a lot into the box. But we were structured. Well, like Carlos, maybe it works at this level. Premier League was a bit crap. Yeah, okay.
With Ainsworth, it works on 2 fronts, that question as well, style, because it'd probably be the first manager we've got ever had who's a bit out of the box in the way he dresses, turning up in
He dresses like me. I'd be
skinny jeans.
I'd be able to. Yeah, I'd be able to. I'm wearing skinny jeans now. They don't suit me, but black skinny, rock jeans, and I'll stick my Guns N' Roses t-shirt on. He'll come on the pod and we'll just sit there and talk about Ronnie James Dio and all the greats. He's amazing. Paul Warne was the other one. I think there's a lot to like about Paul Warne.
Yeah.
3 promotions, a Football League trophy. Not the best style of play, but would it be better with better players? Although you can argue that we don't have better players than Rotherham at the minute. He'd get more money, he'd get to work with a better caliber of player, but he's a Rotherham man. And I'm always really skeptical of ex-players that do well at the club where they manage. Paul Jewell did well at Bradford and Wigan, for example, and did crap everywhere else. So I'm always a bit skeptical. There's a few names not mentioned. One of them I think is interesting. I think when you first hear the name, you immediately will go, oh no. But because he's got a reputation of being a bellend, to be honest. But there are a lot of things to consider. He'll get respect due to his playing career. He's got Chelsea connections. He's got a lot of knowledge. A former captain. He's got championship experience as a number 2. He's renowned. He's renowned as a man manager motivator as well, with his captaincy. And he almost joined Huddersfield Town in 1999. John Terry. That hasn't been mentioned. I know.
I would hear that.
I know. See, you've done it. You've got. Oh no, you've done it. Yeah. But I think when you sit and think about it for half an hour, like I did this morning, you immediately go, "Oh no," and then you kind of go, "Oh, actually, there's some things there that actually marry up." But we just cancel. We're going through the names at the minute and just throwing darts. The other name. Fuck it, I'll mention it. The other name that I've got, which hasn't been mentioned, is a guy who has managerial experience. Didn't go particularly well. It went okay. Is Brian Barry Murphy. He's very well thought of at Man City. We love development coaches. It's not the time, like I say, it's not the time to parachute somebody, an idealist in like this. But I would imagine someone like that would appeal to Huddersfield Town because of the style that he brings. He had Rochdale playing tiki-taka. There were all sorts of videos going around at the time where they were Rochdale passing teams to death in League One. Town fans don't like that, I know. But I think there's a really interesting and I had a chat with a friend who's involved in football about him not so long since. We were just chatting about coaches and stuff, and he's saying, his detail's really good and he's got a huge reputation within the game. And what happened at Rochdale is widely regarded as not him, and he actually kept them far higher than what they would have been without him. So I think that's an interesting one to maybe think about as well. But again, the only issue is you're parachuting somebody in. It's PE teacher syndrome a little bit, isn't it? You're parachuting a guy in who hasn't got a huge name or a background in playing.
It is quite a long
into
name,
this.
though, to be fair.
It is. Yeah. Can you imagine if they charge per penny per name on the shirt, per letter?
We'll move on to the Cardiff preview shortly, but I think I get what you're saying about Carrick. I suppose the only thing is, and let's be true, if we did go for someone like that, if it was realistic,
Big Sam.
Football is it's who you know, and like let's be fair, like
that's what we need though.
Yeah, if we got Carrick, for example, we would suddenly get a lot of young Man United loan players who are half decent. Like if we wanted to do that,
well, he's got links to West Ham and Newcastle as well. So.
Exactly, and look at I know some people feel funny about the Cowleys, but like we wouldn't have got Smith Rowe if it wasn't for that Cowley connection. So I suppose there's a benefit to that.
The Cowley connection.
Do you know who the ideal person is for this job, Brady? And we won't get him. But do you know who and everybody absolutely detests the guy. Do you know who the ideal person is? Almost, but he is ideal for the role at the minute. But someone who people dislike even more. And it's Nathan Jones.
Nathan Jones.
Honestly,
he ticks every box 3 times over. But
he does.
An arsehole. And I don't think anybody would.
But it's like if he was
when
like,
he's your arsehole, surely you'll love him. Don't?
The only other name in terms of bosses who are available, I'm already talking myself out of it because I can't see it necessarily in the structure. But a manager who is free, who probably doesn't get a lot of credit where he was before, but he shifted a lot of deadwood out of the club and started playing young players and did well. Michael O'Neill at Stoke, and he did really good with Northern Ireland. But I don't know if he'd come to the structure. But I
think he would.
think that could work.
Short term again, isn't it? I think he lost himself at Stoke. That's. But then again, which managerial appointment isn't usually short term? This is the thing.
They only really got 18 months anyway. I think that's it. Yeah.
Give it Giggsy till the end of the season.
Give it Giggsy. Well, definitely not give it.
Cut
Giggsy.
that.
Yeah, give it.
It's the meme, for God's sake. Yeah.
I know.
Anyway, right. We have talked a lot about coaches. I'm sure we'll do more on when we know. But I think it is interesting. Like if you look past Wagner, it's not. This is the problem, isn't it? We need a firefighter, really, and a lot of the names mentioned would have been good at the start of the season. But we'll see. I'm sure more will come out. There is a game to talk about. This is what we normally do in the warm up, but we'll keep it very short with this. Cardiff. Obviously, we all know where the situation with Town. Cardiff, they won 3-2 in midweek against Middlesbrough, but that was their first win in the last 6. I suppose the question is, we're going to have Narcic and Gary in charge, but before we do that, Cardiff, you'd probably be targeting this for 3 points. Given Cardiff's form and given it's a home game, I know they're kind of managerless. It can work one or two ways. But before we talk a little bit about that, anyone from Cardiff is your key opposition player, lads? Tom.
Oh my God! Do you know what I've got to touch on is our recent run against Cardiff is horrible to look at. 16 games, 5 draws in that, all the rest losses. The last win, obviously, we won one last season, but
John Russell.
It's crazy that, isn't it? And it couldn't have much of a bogey team if you wanted. Amazingly, though, we have a better win ratio against them. It's 30-28, so they've caught up a lot in the last few years. I don't know, man. I had a look at that squad. It's all right. I've gone with Robinson, who's on loan from West Brom, just because he's got 2 assists in 2 games, and you kind of know his quality. He started up top the other night against Middlesbrough. Looked a handful, lasted about an hour. So maybe it's a sense of, and he came off early in the other game he was in as well. So I just think you keep him quiet for a bit. Maybe he won't be creating as much, and then he'll be subbed off. So I've just gone with Callum Robinson, Brady.
Same to be honest, because let's be honest, we were talking more about Schofield. Town would never pay his wages, but I think he's really good at this level, and I think he could have worked well for Town. But I swear we said that about every player when we do this feature. Matt, anyone you picked out?
Yeah, so Cardiff don't score a lot of goals, or they hadn't scored a lot of goals until they put 3 at Middlesbrough. That was slightly worrying in midweek, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But the man who gets a lot of assists, well, not a lot, is it already? But Callum O'Dowd has contributed to 4 of the 7 that they've scored, 2 assists, 2 goals. He had a bit of a rough time at Bristol City, so I think he's a player with something to prove at the minute, and he started the season quite well for Cardiff. So I think he is probably their key player at the minute. I like Callum Robinson, and Perry Ng at the back's decent as well.
He's good.
But yeah, I think Callum O'Dowd at the minute is probably the form player for Cardiff, and depending on whether he plays right or left, Turton or Nakayama or whoever's there is going to really have to sort of look after him.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Tom, it's time for a view from the other side, isn't it? You caught up with someone, didn't you? Would you like to tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, Tom go to Cardiff was the result, and I caught up with Tom, and we discussed what their thoughts on ahead of Saturday was. So here it is.
We've lost to a pub side. We've literally lost to a pub side.
Hi, Tom, mate. Thank you for inviting me to Cardiff today. It's a pleasure to be here. So I've got a few questions for you, if you don't mind me asking. So, first off, what are your thoughts on Cardiff's start to the season?
The word I'd use to describe Cardiff's start to the season is inconsistent. There's times where we've looked really quite decent, such as the first half in our last game against Middlesbrough, where we were 3-0 up before half-time. Then other games where we've just not looked at it at all, like the seven-side derby away to Bristol City, which we lost. It was always going to be a bit of a tricky one to get any kind of solid form going with the amount of incomings we had, and players would need time to gel. But hopefully that can be a thing of the past now. Like I said, we've just come off a pretty decent result away to Middlesbrough, which was always going to be a tough place to go. And hopefully it can be the start of something and putting some decent form together.
Which players should we look out for this season?
We've got quite a few players, I'd say, to look out for this season with the amount of signings we made in the transfer window, be that people coming in on loan or permanently signing. If I had to say one player to definitely look out for, it'd be Callum O'Dowda. We signed him on a free, but I think he's probably been our best player so far this season. Definitely our best creative outlet going forward. He's contributed to quite a few goals this season. And looking forward to the rest of the year, I'd say O'Dowda's definitely one that everyone should be looking out for.
And what's your score prediction for Saturday?
Like I said previously, I hope now that after coming off the back of a good win away to Middlesbrough, that we can pull a little bit of form together. And Saturday's a perfect opportunity to do that. Huddersfield, it's not always a bit of a tricky place to go. But with all that in mind, I'm going to go with a close game and say a 2-1 Cardiff City win.
And there we go. Thanks, Tom, for giving us some insight there.
Two nice guys there, eh?
Yeah.
Having a nice chat.
It was very good to hear. It's always good to hear, isn't it, what Town are going to struggle with in the upcoming game.
He's decent, this Tom from Cardiff. I think he's one of the good ones, isn't he, though, where we get position info from. Yeah, he's
definitely. Okay. Well, this is making me think we should do the warm up like this, because we've rattled through half of it.
I know, it's great.
You're the boss time. So I suppose this is the most interesting point in terms of the preview for Saturday. So in Schofield's last game, it was 3-4-3 according to SofaScore. I agree with you, Matt. It did feel like 5 defenders, 5 attackers at one point. But it was, according to the SofaScore, Nichols in goal, back three of Lees, Hellick and Bete, 4 of Turton, Kasumi, Redoni and Nakayama, and then Holmes, Ward and Thomas as the 3 up front. Matt, what would you do for this one? It'll be interesting because do you know what? And this is hoping more than necessarily thinking it would happen. It reminds me of when we played Forest. They just got rid of Houghton. I was chatting to all the Forest fans. They were like, how many are you going to put past us today? And I kind of feel like this with Cardiff, but maybe we'll see a response. And I think we might see a response. But what would you line up in this one?
I think Danny's really unlucky, actually, because he stumbled. I think during the game he changed system 3 times. He started with the 3-4-3 with Nakayama coming in to form like this sort of diamond shape between the 2 defenders, and then Betty went left, and Sorba was supposed to drop off, I think, but he never really dropped off, so it fell down because Sorba didn't really know what he was supposed to do. But I think in theory that looked quite nice, and I imagine it looks really nice on the training field, but it didn't work. But he changed to 3-5-2 second half, brought Pat Jones on, didn't he? And then for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, he changed to a 4-3-3, and we looked good. In that 10-15 minute spell, the best football I think we've played under Danny Schofield. And it was enabled by David Kasumu playing that deep defensive midfield role and being quick enough to get to second balls and mop up certain situations. And he's so key. He's literally the only central midfielder we've got at the minute, or it feels like he's the only central midfielder we've got, because we're playing Hoggy at the back and we're playing people saying Russell should play 10, etc. So it feels like he's the only natural one. But he allowed Tino and Redoni to get forward and support. And I thought we were really good. And you can say a lot of things about that Wigan game, but it wasn't boring by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it wasn't.
So for me, Nichols in goal, Turton at right back just for the solidity. Hellick, Lees, Nakayama at left back. Midfield 3, Redoni, Kasumu, and Dwayne Holmes to start. And then Sorba, Rhodes and Jones up front. I think Rhodes has been better than Danny Ward so far this season. I thought Wardy was uncharacteristically poor on Tuesday. Not going to go in too hard on Danny Ward because he's been outstanding for a year. And Pat Jones, I think he's fine coming off the bench to do things. But I'd just like to see something different up there. Tino brings something different, I think, a bit deeper. And I'd like to see Jones push on their defence a little bit to get in between the fullback and centre-back. So maybe swapping for Tino at some point during that game if it's not working. But yeah, I think that's a good balance, enabled by Kasumu and Holmes in the middle. But yeah, see what happens. 2-1 to Town as well. I know you didn't ask, but I think we'll win.
Well, I was going to ask, you jumped ahead. Matt, sorry, not Matt, Tom, you're the other person on this podcast who's not Matt. How would you line it up?
I think what Matt suggested there is pretty spot on. I'd definitely bring in Rhodes in. I think he's just looked that bit sharper, and
he looks good, doesn't he?
He has, yeah.
Good, yeah.
And he's only been coming on for about 20-15 minutes, and that hitting the crossbar against Wigan was so close. I think it just got nicked. It just got nicked by their defender, and it just lifted it up.
Oh, do you know? I feel really bad now, Tom. Sorry. Well, I'll say this before I forget, but I feel really bad for Danny Schofield that we've kind of gone into that and not actually saying how unlucky Danny Schofield was throughout his tenure. So much bad luck with Hawkeye.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, I've said it now.
Yeah, you've got to take that into account, haven't there? Because there's been chances in games, hasn't there? There's been chances where we've just not been clinical, which was kind of one of our good points last season. We took us chances and defended well. And we've almost reversed it this year. I'm going same as Matt, to be honest. I think that sounds perfect. It was so good to see Kasumu back in. Some of his challenges is exactly what you were expecting from him, and what we got a glimpse of for Burnley. Let's just hope he can just keep fit. David
Wagner would love Kasumu.
Holmes dropping back would be nice, and that'd be interesting to see that. And Andrew causes you problems, doesn't it? That's the one. He's our player that's going to cause any team's problems this year. Maybe he only does it in spells. That's the only thing he can't. He goes through about half an hour, 20 minutes where he's like unplayable almost, and then sometimes just drifts away. So maybe it's managing those moments with him as well is quite an interesting step forward this season, I think. But yeah, that Brady. There we go.
I agree with you both about Rhodes. I think he looks sharp. I think what I've really noticed, and this is no disrespect to Ward, and I actually think Ward's energy maybe is a sub, because you would have to take Rhodes off at some point. Could help, but Rhodes is just he offers something different to Ward, and he's just so good at, like, he wins those challenges high up the field when we're under pressure, and I think he deserves a nod. I know he got a start a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, I thought Holmes got some stick against Wigan, which was unfair. I thought he was pretty good, so I quite like the idea of Radoni, Kasumu, Holmes. So I'm going to nick your midfield, Matt.
Just give me the job. Maybe we don't. Maybe just give me the job. You know?
Hey, I tell you what, put us three in, because they'll be home for Saturday. I'm
definitely
going
respect
anyway.
that, won't they?
Yeah.
It's like that time Tim Sherwood let a fan sit in the dugout the last time.
Oh, well, yeah, but what about his win ratio?
Yeah, true. No, I think the same. To be honest, the only one I think Pat Jones is really good, but I don't know.
I have a question mark over Sorba. There's a question mark, I think, over Sorba after halftime. His halftime thing, and
do you know what?
But because Danny Schofield has gone, it might not be an issue anymore. But I think you have to. I think you just throwing this to you now, Brady. I think you absolutely nailed it online the other day with what you said about Sorba Thomas and the stick he's getting.
It's ridiculous.
Some of the, I'm not going to say the famous, I'm not going to betray confidence thing, but I'm not going to sort of say who's told me things, but people have told me certain things, that some of the stuff he's getting on Instagram and other means is absolutely abhorrent at the minute. Stop being a twat, essentially, is the message. and just, you know what I mean? There's having an opinion, which is fine, isn't there? And there's been a twat. Just don't be a twat.
Just stop slagging off our own players. Like, you know,
it's all right in context. Well. It's all right in context. After the game, you're entitled to boo. You're entitled to say that was, you know, but don't message them abuse. Just don't do that shit.
The thing is, anyway. Like, yeah, I know we're getting sidetracked, but I know you can't apply logic to football because it's an emotional thing. But like, imagine if you've had a bad day at work. And like, Tom, you've had a bad day at work. It's not your drawing's not gone as well as you want. That's the technical knowledge. And you get home and there's me sending you Instagram messages saying you're shit and you need to like you're a disgrace and probably, you know, saying something awful about your family. I just don't get it. Like, people aren't going to be like, oh well, I'm motivated to do a lot better. So yeah, that's it for me. I think you're right. Thomas might be freed up. The other thing is maybe put Tino in because I do think Tino's that difference maker, but he's a bit Sinani-esque in terms of he's either going to give you something or he's going to give you nothing.
His decision making can be really ropey. Tino, he doesn't. Sometimes he holds on to it too long and doesn't play. You know, he doesn't always see certain things. But then he's incredible. Like Tom says, he's incredible for spells, isn't he? But that's what you get when you loan young players, though, isn't it? You get 100%. You get them learning on the roll day. So there you go.
I mean, that West Brom game, his 2 goals. I don't think we're even that good.
It's goal of the season already, isn't it? It's phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Anyway,
as well not watch all the rest of the goals. It's not going to be good.
You've given us your match prediction, Matt. Tom, what's your match prediction?
I have 2-1 as well. I do think Town. I'm not saying they will win, but they can win this game. From what I'm getting from Cardiff, they're one of the weaker teams in the league, I think, at the moment. And I know Town are probably rock bottom of that pile in reality. So I think it's a chance for Town to kind of, have a go on Saturday and pick up 3 points, get us a bit closer to everyone else.
Can I give you something to think about, Brady?
Yes, go on. I love to think.
If Town win the game and play well, does that say a lot about how the players were towards Danny Schofield? And does that maybe indicate that was the problem, the breakdown was between the players and Danny Schofield? Or do you think, essentially my question is, if we win or lose, do you think that will identify in 90 minutes, in that micro 90 minutes, where the problems were?
Yeah, I've predicted us for a win in this. I think, I hate to say it, and I don't think it's even necessarily to do with Schofield. I think you could maybe say that things weren't working tactically. I think the players will be freed up, and we see that with whoever. You normally do get a response when a manager's gone. I think we could win this game as well because I think Cardiff have been a bit hit and miss.
Beat Middlesbrough though. Beat Middlesbrough.
No, I know, but but I think the crowd will be quite positive on Saturday. I'd like to think so. Anyway, I think we'll win it. I think players will be freed, and I don't think that's necessarily a slight on Schofield, but I think it's just, again, like we've talked about it, he's the guy after the guy who's done so well. So I think we will see a response now, get a win, and I don't think that necessarily just says about Schofield. I just think maybe it's kind of a, because I hate to say it as well, but there is people who you say it was the cheap option to get Schofield. So I wonder if it's going to be a response in that sense. And look, that would be perfect. We get a win, and then we have 2 weeks to pick a coach and think about it. I think they will win. I'm going to go with you guys as well. Full house 2-1. I just think we're going to win. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But before we go, this has been a long podcast. Thanks for sticking with us. If you leave at this point, how dare you? We put a lot of time and effort into this. So
full
it's
Peter
time.
Kay then.
I was a bit Greta Thunberg there. How dare
Sorry.
It's time for the amazing.
I think the fans can probably see I was trying my best, working hard.
The amazing elbow.
As a centre forward, the last thing you want is a goal drought starting off at a club. Started on my own up front, and the really good centre forwards like Jordan were rested.
Tom, take it away. We need a hero, don't we?
We do need a hero. Maybe the amazing elbow could come in and save the day. So, where were we at? He was captured by those dinner ladies, wasn't he, in the kitman's office? And luckily, in his sock, out flies Hawkeye, his little trusty companion, Hawkeye, who helps him escape by distracting the dinner ladies, basically. But as the amazing elbow is exiting the office, all of a sudden, Hawkeye ... And once again, thank you, listeners. You voted in your millions this week, which is really impressive. And it was actually a draw. It was can you believe that? Out of like
We've had so many
44
draws.
million votes, that it ended in a draw. 36.4% voted for he malfunctions for the second time in his entire life. And he also gives a weak apology. So we've combined those two together. So here it is. So he exits the office, but all of a sudden, Hawkeye malfunctions whilst giving a weak apology to the dinner ladies, who come across a mixture of confused and angry. So yeah, this kind of stuns the amazing elbow as he's escaping, but all of a sudden ... So what happens next? So he has malfunctioned whilst giving an apology randomly to the dinner ladies. And what happens next in the story? Matt, would you, as the guest, would you like to kick this one off?
Yes, I'm going to apologize for this before I start, because I had some time to think about this, and the combination of me and time is really dangerous. So I've gone a little bit dramatic, and I've maybe written way too much for this section. And I'm trying to get my pound of flesh worth, because I probably won't be on this for another couple of months to join in. So
we've got 25 characters in the Twitter poll, Matt, before. So just bear that in mind.
This is going to be difficult to.
We might just have to put Matt's answer for this.
Yeah. So shall I try and do a dramatic reading? I'm not.
Brady, you
I'm
can
not
insert some music over this. That would be really good.
Insert an echo on my voice, Brady, and some like hero music, if you like, in the background. Okay. So Hawkeye appears to fail, but on inspection there is a statement that says, "Look to my coming on the first light of the 5th day. At dawn, look to the east." MH. As the increasing number of dinner ladies swarm around our hero, the sun crackles and breaks through the clouds. Our hero looks to the east, and on top of the Kilner Bank, where surrounded by the low-hanging sun, is a silhouette becoming clearer with every passing second. As the sun rises over the ridge of the Kilner Bank, standing resplendent is Michael Heffler, saddled upon a giraffe in combat gear. Ready, he raises his right arm to his mouth and blows the conch, formerly known as the Josh Koroma conch, and a small army of cult heroes, led by David Wagner, all on horseback, come forward. There's Lerver, Kachunga, Moy, Schindler, Bueller, Karim Matmore, and Eric Derm with a slice of toast in his hand. And David Wagner shouts, "It doesn't count how experienced you are. It doesn't count how nice you are. If you have desire, passion, you have no limits." And then they charge.
Jesus.
Draw that, Thomas. That was awful.
I kind of don't want to give an answer, because I want to draw Michael Heffley riding a.
Can you tell which film I'd caught 5 minutes of before actually doing that?
Yeah.
Maybe.
It was.
It's a complete rip-off, isn't it?
It was Alien, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the one.
Jaws.
Jaws.
Trolls World Tour.
That was incredible. Brady, do you have an answer to follow that?
I just apologise to everyone that's had to listen to that as well before we go on.
I don't know. With the dramatic music over the top, that's going to sound great.
Good luck, Brady.
I mean, thanks. Yeah, this is what Tom just gives me more stuff to edit. I've got a tight deadline to get it out as it is. How do you follow that?
How do you follow Kareem Matmore?
Yeah. What happened? I've kind of forgotten what's happened to Hawkeye. So what, he's malfunctioning and
he's reading an apology whilst malfunctioning. That's it. And then what happens all of a sudden? So the amazing elbow's escaping, and all of a sudden,
you hear a shriek, and it's coming from the dugout. And there's a mysteriously shadowy figure sat in the manager's seat.
Ooh, bit topical. Matt's was topical though. The return of Wagner. Oh, what can I do? So mine is, and all of a sudden, he elbows Alex Bruce, and Alex Bruce gets a red card for it.
That was amazing. I was at that game. It's one of the funniest things you've ever seen, isn't it? Where Alan Lee just runs past him and just goes whack, and then just plays innocent. And do you remember the time at MK Dons as well? There was a big lumbering centre back whose centre of gravity was in his head.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember his name. Gary McKenzie. And Alan Lee absolutely shithoused him, and Mackenzie went about 6 inches from him to argue with him, and Alan Lee did a swan dive like this and went down, and he got him sent off. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. I'd love Alan Lee on the podcast.
Yeah,
a shithouse episode with Alan Lee.
Yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it?
I might ask him. World Cup break. Let's do it.
Oh yeah. Let's try it. Let's try it.
Let's try it. Right. Okay. So we've got 3 answers there. So we've got Michael Heffler's Giraffe Army on the return of Wagner, a shadowy figure in the manager's seat. And Tom, I love how you've been referring to him as Steve Bruce as the Cabbage Man and the Cabbage Boy, and you just went, he just elbows Alex Bruce. Just give him the game away.
That's going to win because that's really funny.
No, it's not. It's going to be the return of... Oh, come on, Matt. It's going to be the Giraffe Army.
It's the precursor, isn't it, to Return of the King? That's the whole joke.
Exactly. If Mats doesn't win, then there's no justice.
Please don't clip me actually doing it on camera as well, Brady, because I felt like such a twat delivering that.
Don't tempt me. If Mats doesn't win, it's because the 25 characters have let us down.
It's because people don't listen to the podcast, Brady, and just vote.
They do listen. This is the best bit. This is the best bit. Right, okay, we're gonna wrap it up there before I get to have a little tantrum. Thanks to everyone for listening. This has been a long one, but we did want to talk about Schofield and the next steps, and obviously with the main pod not getting done, we wanted to really include that. Thanks to Matt and Tom for joining me. Thanks to you all for listening. Thank you to Magic Rock as always for sponsoring. Guess what? You can get 10% off all online orders. I always stop at that bit with the code AHTTC10. So check that out, and I'm sure we'll all be at the tap room on Saturday celebrating the start of the new interim reign, or maybe permanent if it goes well. Who knows? Ta-ta for now. That's it. I'm going to shut up. Thanks to you all for listening. We'll see you next time. Up the town.
Up the town.
So town player, bring the car back to Huddersfield.